our way of being comes from our way of thinking, which is usually evidenced by the things we say. So if we're complaining or this isn't going to work or negative kind of language, it reveals what it is that something we're believing that is not true, that needs to be examined and redesigned, because once that's examined and redesigned, it changes our way of being in such a way that we see other possibilities and things start to open up, just like it did for me and does for my client.
That's such a huge point with just what it does to you in the process, because and I think that goes back to I want to be a box office star. Yeah. Maybe by the time you get there, that's not even what you really want, and I think there's so much the one option I think is to hope for that. Yeah. But not change any action, and that's just sort of hope, right?
That's exactly, and I talk about that a lot in the book. I have this distinction between new dreamers and old dreamers. And old dreamers are the ones that they hope and they wish and they think and they want and they wish upon a star, and that kind of thing. That type of longing is actually a really victimized kind of place that it becomes a racket of this is what I want. And there's actually some studies done that there's a tranquilizing effect when we say, I'm going to do this someday. We don't take any action. We have no plans to take any action, but we feel a little bit better because we're like, yeah, maybe I will do that someday. But on the flip side, the new dreamer says, here's what I'm going to have, and by this time, and like you said, it's just a goal. It doesn't have to happen exactly how I said, but here's what I want. That changes present state. That future-based language changes how I show up right now, and then that change of being helps me move toward that goal.
Well, bouncing off that, how you're just talking about new dreamers in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about new dreamers and where they go and what their roadblocks are?
That's right. So I was contrasting old dreamers and new dreamers, ended up losing my train of thought. But old dreamer says, I wish, I long for, I hope for, and they don't have to do anything about it. A new dreamer says, what is it that I want? What's the smallest thing I have to do today to get it started? And they start moving toward that thing. New dreamers also, a lot of things they do, because my book is riddled with all these kind of principles, but it all kind of centers around this idea of being versus doing that we talked about. And our being, the way we change our way of being, is examining our limiting voices, because our way of being comes from our way of thinking, which is usually evidenced by the things we say. So if we're complaining or this isn't going to work or negative kind of language, it reveals what it is that something we're believing that is not true, that needs to be examined and redesigned, because once that's examined and redesigned, it changes our way of being in such a way that we see other possibilities and things start to open up, just like it did for me and does for my clients. In fact, one of my clients, she's a baller. Like she's done, she's like a TED Talk. She's got these really successful companies. Anyway, so we started talking and found out that she believed that she couldn't make more money. But once we really explored it, one of her limiting thoughts it's unspiritual to make a lot of money. But then once we got really clear about what would you do? Okay, let's say you made an extra, $500,000 this upcoming year. What would you do with that money? Oh, I do this and this, and it's all these beautiful things that she would do with money. Anyway, fast forward a year, she made $600,000 more the following year, because it changed the way of her thoughts and beliefs. So she wasn't pushing away opportunities that were coming at her door, thinking that it's unspiritual.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Within it was making me think when you're talking about just the hope and the change. It was almost, I think there's the other perspective of people who just buy lotto tickets, and they want it. It's like you dream, or you want to be something, but it doesn't ever change you. And I think it's a totally different personality. But then, is that something that can be trained, or is it like you're either born to be a hoper or you're born to be someone of action? Like, can you change how you're wired? Or is it wiring, or is it just sort of laziness? Yeah,
and I'm glad you said that, because I think that's another common limiting belief, is that I'm wired a certain way. One of my chapters I talk about personality. Like, I love personality tests, StrengthsFinder, Enneagram, DISC. It's fun to how am I wired? I love that. I used to say that all the time, but when I started thinking about it, I thought, there are certain grooves that we've carved out in our life because they're habits. Some are really positive and they get great results, but a lot are these other grooves that don't get us the results we want. So when we're not wired anyway, that's the great thing about these principles, is that we can shift our way of being and our way of thinking in a moment. And I know it sounds like an infomercial, but I've seen it so many times with my own clients and with myself that it can shift in a moment. There's no way that I am or I'm not. Like I talk a lot about pessimism and optimism, or at least in this one chapter. And I talk about how I asked my wife, and this wasn't even that long ago, a year ago or something, I said, would you consider me an optimist or a pessimist? Without even thinking, she said, a pessimist. I was like, oh my gosh. But I was a little surprised, but I wasn't like disheartened, because I believe firmly that it's programming, it's language, and I've just gotten into the habit of pessimistic language. And so what I started doing was just paying attention to my language, talking to my coach about paying attention to my language and the things that came out of my mouth, and I'm beginning to reprogram those grooves that I've cut at pessimism, and my language is becoming more optimistic and my thoughts are more optimistic, and then that's a way to kind of shift and reprogram, because we're just habits. That's what we are. We're not, I'm this personality and this is all I'll ever be. We're just a set of habits that we've built usually in childhood in order to survive.
Have you read the book, The Road Less Traveled?
That's one of my very favorite books of all time.
Being all of your masters that you have, I'd imagine that's one of the books you've read. A portion of that which resonated with me a lot, and sort of does correlate with all this, is he's talking about the author is saying, I grew up, and my whole life I thought that I was just mechanically deficient.
Yeah.
I couldn't fix anything. Some people are born like wired to be able to do that, and some people just aren't. And then all of a sudden I was walking my dogs, and some guy was fixing his lawnmower, and he's like, oh man, I wish I knew how to do that. And the guy said, you can, you're just lazy. And he's sort of like, I sort of walked away like, that was weird, but then it's like it just sort of stuck in my head, and it stuck in my head, and it's like basically it got to the point where he realized that he could fix things, and he actually sat down and he tried a couple times, and he did. I sort of grew up that way. My dad didn't ever show me how to like fix cars or fix anything in the house, and so I've always said, I'm not really good at that sort of stuff. But now that I'm a homeowner and a husband, and I've had to learn, and it's like, oh, some of the stuff's actually pretty easy. But it's that whole principle. I think we get so stuck in saying like, I'm not this, or introvert, extrovert. I think those things can be, especially if you're wired more introvertedly. I bet that is that a limiting voice that
Oh, for me, because I am an introvert. Like when I take the Myers-Briggs, I show up as an introvert and a pretty strong introvert, but also I can be an extrovert anytime I need to be, just like anybody else. It's just a decision and a choice to say, I'm gonna, like if somebody was like, okay, I'll give you, and actually in some ways this has been a lot of my life, I'll give you X amount of dollars if you just go and just be the most extroverted self that you can be. I'll give you X amount of dollars for this night. I'd be like, yeah, let's do that. And in a lot of ways, that's who I've become as a speaker and as a performer and as an actor and as a musician, all that stuff. It's like you go and I can, in a way, it feels like I'm being a fraud and faking it, but it's just as much a part of me as sitting at home and watching TV and being a recluse. I've created a habit of being more of a recluse, but it's not who I am. I'm not wired that way.
Thanks tons for watching, and hope you loved that video. If you listen to podcasts, you can find this whole conversation along with a bunch of conversations with other talented artists, designers, illustrators, photographers on the Artist Report podcast, which you can find on any platform that you would listen to podcasts. So would really hope that you could go subscribe to that, check out some of those conversations, and then, this is a place where we are basically trying to draw out from other really talented people what they do, how they've done it, and ultimately that's hopefully inspiring you and challenging you. So hope you love this. You can subscribe to our channel here, the YouTube channel, or click the link below and that'll take you to the Artist Report newsletter. So stay tuned for more and hope to see you around. Thanks.